Hey y'all, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. Thanks for joining us on YouTube. We are continuing our countdown to meat bird move-in day. We're at tip 16, and tip 16 is to scrutinize your site where you're going to house your birds and look for the evidence of the presence of rodents. We don't want rodents in the barn, but barns are attractive places to rodents, so we are constantly wanting to be vigilant about knowing if they're there, knowing where they're coming around at, knowing what's attracting them, and trying to prevent as much of the rodent activity inside of our building as we possibly can. So in this building, we have actually had a break from meat birds. There's mama hen and Oakley chick, and of course they are not what we consider meat birds. We raise Cornish rock cross meat chickens, and they're the white feathered birds that grow rapidly, and we can actually have them ready to harvest for poultry in 42 days. And so we raise those on a 6-week production cycle. But mama hen is a golden lace Wyandotte that was in our egg production building and went broody, and we got some fertilized hatching eggs, and we ended up, she hatched this little chick, Oakley chick, on June 30th, 2023. And our last meat birds were here. Their last day was June 26, 2023. So these two birds have had the meat bird production barn all of this time to themselves since we were done with meat birds the first half of the year. So they're going to have to actually be moved out, is what we anticipate, and our birds are moving in about a week. So what we've got going here is a 30 by 30 foot wooden barn structure, and where we see these wooden short walls, they are knee high, and that is a setup that's anticipated for where we want our 300 Cornish rock cross meat chickens to finish production. So that's where we envision them living from the time they turn 2 weeks to the time they turn 6 weeks. And it includes the area that has the bedding material on it inside of that set of yellow temporary walls. So all of this space for 300 birds from 2 weeks old to 6 weeks old. And then the space that you saw there that has the yellow walls around it, those are actually transport crates of ours. And we built a temporary wall system to make a temporary brooder space. So that's where we anticipate starting our birds. So tip 15 was to set all of this up. Set up your physical spaces for your birds and see how it looks, and see if the layout looks like it's going to work and manageable for you to work in. And then what we're recommending today and what we're doing today and will continue to do basically on a daily basis is what I said with tip 16. Scrutinize the building looking for the presence of rodents. In general, we don't want rodents in the building if we can help it. But like I said, with barns being attractive to rodents, it's constantly something that we're managing for. And one thing about our situation, the brooder being on the floor like this in our barn is probably not a typical brooder situation. So on one hand, we could look at that as something that gives us an increased risk when our birds are chicks, especially even with predators, but also with maybe rodents, you know, being in the barn area. But then the other thing that we've discerned with flocks is that truly throughout the entire production, from the time you're brooding them as chicks to through their growing to the time that they're finishing it at 42 days or whatever an operator's production cycle is, these birds are truly vulnerable all of the time. So throughout the entire production. So for us here in our system, we basically just incorporate that risk factor into what we're managing for throughout production. We are also not saying that you have to start birds like this. If that is outside of a comfort zone for a producer, we would not recommend that you do that. Brooder boxes can be used that are like maybe waist high and confine the birds more and lift them up off of the floor. Large livestock tanks can be used, and that makes a really more formidable barrier between the floor and the surroundings and the chicks. So those are options. We do this. Why do we do this? We do this because it's just what we found works for us. When we're raising flocks of 100 birds or more at one time, we want to be able to keep them all in the same place, and we want to be able to actually get inside the brooder and work and adjust with whatever we need to adjust for them. We also want it to be very easy to move the birds from their brooding space to their growing and finishing space. Because one thing we've experienced and learned is if we have to move 2-week-old, even week-old or 2-week-old Cornish Rock Cross, worst case scenario, if we have to move them one at a time by hand, that's tough to do. It takes a lot of time. It's tough to do. It takes a lot of energy from the handlers. It creates a lot of stress on the birds. So we've tried to make our system where it's super simple and zero stress on the birds to go from whatever we set up for them as a brooder situation to where we want to have them living in their growing and finishing situation. So that is why we do this kind of setup where we've got a brooder pen inside of a finish pen inside of our production barn. And it works for us, but there's not one correct way to do it. So if a different way is in a producer's comfort zone, by all means, that is definitely what needs to be done in each operation. So I will show you though, as we set this up, we're satisfied with this. We do anticipate that after maybe 4 days, we might have to actually enlarge our brooder pen. We'll add like 4 more of our yellow transport crates in and kind of enlarge that footprint. And that's the other thing for us why we do this brooder setup. We would like their brooder setup to last about 2 weeks. And we will find often that, just like I said, like we're anticipating after about 4 days, we'll need to probably add room to this in order to accommodate all of them at a heat lamp, because in the evenings it's going to be cool enough that they're going to need to be having supplemental heat on them. So if like in 4 days this isn't big enough, then we've got to adjust it. And so we do want to try to make their brooding situation where we can basically keep them in it for about 2 weeks, because that's what works here. That's what works for us. And so we can do that in a space like this. Like I said, we may enlarge it a bit and add 2 more heat lamps into the brooder situation. But our whole pen is set up where we can actually, we've got all of the chains and electric power source already in the rafters that we can drop down, and we can put heat lamps throughout the entire growing and finishing space if we need to. So that's why we do this kind of setup. So I can show you a couple of the places that we really watch for rodents wanting to come in, and that we watch for evidence of rodent activity. So we have right here we know that field mice is going to be the rodent that we're going to be watching for, because we have a cornfield to the north, a soybean field to the south. Between our barn and the soybean field is a stream, and on our east side is woods, and at the end of the woods is a significant creek. So this is an area where especially field mice are prevalent, they frequent, they find everything they need, and then we put a barn smack dab in the middle of it, and their little field mice brains know, ooh, like there's heat in there, and there's straw to nest in, and there's easier food source and easier water source. So we know that that's going to be something we need to watch for. And there could be bigger things, bigger rodents that, we really would consider predators that we need to watch for too. So one place we really watch for is back here, well, anywhere in our barn, but like at the base of our walls around the perimeter of the barn, because with the flooring material that we have, it would not be unexpected or out of the ordinary for something to be on the outside of our walls and decide to tunnel into our building. And then here, you can't see it because it's not the big picture of it, but this is actually a double doorway here, and this is a removable panel. We're going to actually be taking that removable panel off, and we've got to lower it because we've got a gap here, so we don't want anything coming in. So we're going to lower that whole panel and refasten it back in there. So down there at the bottom, though, those are places where we would be watching for something digging or tunneling or squeezing in, because that's how particularly field mice are going to come in. And look here, here's the tunneling situation. And so again, this is something that's like an inherent part of the structure of our building. Our floor is limestone screenings, and so that's not gravel. It's a base material that actually is great for barns because of two features. It's compactable and it sheds water. So limestone screenings is a great base material that functions well on a barn floor, but it's also diggable, as is dirt. So, you know, we had a tunnel there because we had some pallets of feed sacks stacked there, and so they tunneled in, attracted to the feed, and did actually tear into a bag of feed and spill some feed. So those are the kinds of things with combating rodents. You want to keep things picked up, cleaned up. If there is a mess, like if we spill feed, we need to clean that up right away. If we see evidence of rodents, we need to move things that might be in storage to try to disrupt them wanting to nest. We need to clean up any extra easy food sources, which again, in a barn, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because we're going to feed 300 birds here. So, you know, there's going to be feed accessible. But do take tip 16 to heart. I spent extra time on it because it's important. It is a concern about rodents in the environment where your birds are. So take time to scrutinize your building and the housing system and look for evidence of rodents and to try to get rid of them and to try to prevent them coming in or coming back in, because that will help the space be safe for your birds, safe for people to work in, and it'll just help with the flock production. We want these birds to be able to start well, grow well, and finish well. Please join us again at Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. We really appreciate you. God bless you.